Welcome to episode 7 of season 2 of Matire Gemi, a bi-weekly podcast where we help you learn the Gikuyu culture, history, and heritage in English and in a fun, light-hearted way. I'm your anchor, Jerry Wadiho, Mojiro wa Barea Kihara. And as always, I'm joined by Wayaki and Kingoriwa Kanyi. Today's episode is all about you. It's the first of the listeners edition. And before we even continue, I want to say thank you to all of you that submitted questions. They were rich, they were diverse, and they were so much fun to respond to. I'd like to start by kind of highlighting some of the people that sent us numerous questions. So hey there, Eric Mongai, thank you. Tasha, hello. Nyakaheti, hi. Gilbert Kimani, thank you. Angie Mokora, we appreciate you. Maggie Nyokavi, thank you. Apple Tamu, yes. Nyams, Mami Diary, yes, and Wamboi, thank you. Those are just some of the names of the people that continue to engage and ask questions and send their questions to social media. We are so grateful. We are also really grateful for the number of you that continue to highlight us on your pages, that continue to share us publicly or privately with your friends, and that continue to listen and engage with this podcast. We are who we are because of you. Today's episode is really delicious, and I really mean that. And the reason it's so delicious is because this first section allows us to answer 10 of the 23 questions that you submitted to us. So let me tell you the bucket in which these questions will fall. These questions will fall into two buckets, Ûthoni and Irua. And let me tell you the categories of these questions. And let me tell you guys, they're delicious. So listen all the way to the end. So we will be talking or answering questions verbatim, right, on rorashio and single parenthood. How does single parenthood affect rorashio? We also go in and we talk about widowhood, divorce, and separation, and how that actually affects a woman or a man who is entering into the process of matrimony. We also talk about the question that has to do with intermarriage between a Mogikoyo and another culture. Which culture prevails? What do you do? We then go ahead and also talk about child adoption. We had quite a few questions on this topic, and we go in deeper and talk about how the pre-colonial Mogikoyo thought of fatherhood and child adoption. And then the final category has to do with questions around belonging to a kiama or jama. What does it take? And how can you gain the knowledge that is typically disbursed through a kiama or jama? Ooh, let me tell you, in this episode, I was glued in to everything that Wayaki and Kingori shared with us. So lean back and enjoy the journey. All right, Wayaki and Kingori, I am so excited for us to jump into these delicious, intriguing, and powerful questions that our listeners have asked. But before we do that, let's do some introductions as always. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Wayaki, to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Njeri, and I definitely want to thank our audience for asking these wonderful questions, which we hope to tackle in the best way. Jitago Wayaki wa Gĩchanga, ndĩ mũcera wa Barea Mũturi, hamari kama wathani ndĩ wa Mwangi, ngaciarwo nĩ Maina, na o mũthenya nĩ njugaga nĩ thayũ.
Wow, thank you so much, Wayaki. As always, the listeners really appreciate all the insight and the knowledge that you bring. And now at this point, I'm going to distract Kingori from watching the rugby game, Kenya versus South Africa, and ask him to introduce himself.
Thank you for the distraction, because we're actually being distracted. So it's not going very well, but hey, once again, Kingori wa Kanyi. Moboi wa Barea Marigo wagetha kukia muruga marika mawathani ni Mwangi ngaciarwo ni Maina na ndi muthuri wa kiama na hindi ciothe ni njugaga ni thayo. Jerry, this is a wonderful episode. We're really looking forward to tackling the questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you, Kengori. And you have been such a wonderful addition, to the podcast. I think everybody enjoys your perspective. And
Thank you.
Wayaki and I really enjoy having you here with us.
Thank you very much.
I think it's time for us to jump in. And so to our listeners, I want to share with you what we've decided to do. So what we've done is that we have bunched all of your wonderful questions into segments and categories. Now, we're still going to read your questions as is, right? But what we've done is we're going to bunch them together just so we make sure that we are staying thematically in a little bit of a logical way. So we're going to start off with the questions that were related to Ûthoni. But before I even jump in and ask the first question, I would like one of you two gentlemen to remind us, what is Ûthoni?
I'll give the simple or the short answer. So Ûthoni comes from the word dhoni, which is a shy respect. And so Ûthoni is a relationship between the father of the bride and the father of the groom. So their relationship is what we call Ûthoni. They're the ones who create that foundation for a couple to be successful in that union, which we call marriage.
Okay, beautiful. All right. Thank you, Wayaki. So I'm going to jump into the first question. And I'm not going to pick who goes. You guys are just going to filter and figure out who wants to really answer the question. So we'll start with the first one. And this first question, guys, is what happened? This is the first question verbatim. What happened in a polygamous situation? Did a man have to complete rorashio for one wife before marrying another?
Yeah, I'll let Kingori go first on this one.
Okay.
That's a good one. That's actually a really good question because we didn't get to talk about the institution of marriage from a polygamous perspective during the episodes where we were covering rorashio and Ûthoni. So I think it's a good one, very timely question. So, in an environment where everything was going well, in a polygamous scenario, the Mogekoyo woman is the one who used to champion that the husband have a second, third, or fourth wife.
Why would you do that?
Well, there are many advantages to that. Number one, these women understood that for there to be greater wealth, it also included more children, and with that, the ability to cover more land, have more flock, and that they understood that having a lot of children, a lot of homes was seen as a wealthy scenario. So, as the first wife, you were very well positioned. You were very well positioned if your husband also had multiple wives, because it uplifted you in the society as the chief wife of that now very well renowned and wealthy man, and also you were the second in command in that homestead, in some sort. So there was a lot of authority and reverence that this chief wife carried when there were junior wives that also took some kind of direction from her on some issues. So a lot of the scenarios where a man had more than one wife, the chief wife was instrumental in making it happen. And so in order for a man to now dream of having another wife, usually it means that the first wife is very well taken care of, lacks nothing. And yes, they've rashied everything. There's nothing. Wamemaliza. They're in very good standing. Chances are she's feeling very well supported. They are Ûthoni with her in-laws, is very well established, and there's no sense of any fear or anything like that having a second wife coming in would make anything less for her. In fact, it would be an addition. That's how they used to see it. It's like Nekwara Miyamehaka. It's expansion. So yes, to answer this question very straightly, often or it was expected that everything has been done for the first wife. she's in very good standing. The Mara Asheti, and they've already done the Gurario, which is Korega Kiade, and she's here to stay forever. So that now you can now think about a second or a third wife. The first wives have to be sorted out.
And if I was to transport myself, right, take myself off of what we call quote unquote the modern woman and transport myself back then, if somebody was approaching me to be a second wife and we're putting ourselves as a pre-colonial Ayekoyo, how would I think? I would be evaluating that man based on how well he took care of his first wife. So if he wasn't doing a good job being a great father and husband and having the definition of wealth that the Ayekoyo, how the Moyekoyo defined wealth, then at that point, I wouldn't be attracted to him as a second wife. So it does make sense what you're saying, King Ori, which is the man had to really have taken good care of his first wife, even to be attractive. Because all of this was voluntary, if we remember, based on the other sessions, even to be attractive to other women, right? In order who would want to step in as a second, third, fourth, fifth wife.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll add something because Kingori has answered that question very well, but I'll also go back in our history and say that the women in our history, in our culture, are the ones that decided that this was the right thing to do. It's a common misconception that men are the ones who are lustful, greedy, they want as many women as possible. But in episode 1 of the origin story, we talked about the story of Wamoyo and the fact that she was never married. That issue was discussed in the women at the time are the ones who decided, and they said, any woman who is of age should not be single, should be eligible to be married. And what that did for the society, it would create a society where it wasn't like infidelity or unrighteousness or lack of chastity and uprightness in families was reduced to a bare minimum. So from a historical perspective, that Rika, which was called Rika Madhigira Keda, which was like the original the Rika after Gikoyo, they decided that, okay, because of this situation with Wamoyo, who was unmarried, and what happened with that story, any woman who is of age a man should be able to take up a second wife if she's willing to be a second wife, if his first wife approves, if the first wife's father approves, because the father of the bride has to assess and see, okay, I've received my rorashio, I have a good relationship with this man's father, my daughter is taken care of, she's married to a righteous man, a good man, they have children and they are growing their wealth and they need more help. Because back in the day, women had 10, 12, 13 children. You can imagine the household chores to take care of that family, that growing family, and even tilling the land. That's why King Ori said it was the first wife who would be like, hey, I need some help. I know this woman. She's single. She's good. Why don't you consider taking her up as a second wife? So really, I just want to cement the fact that there's a historical precedent why it was decided. It was decided by the women that it was important for an orderly society for that to happen. And the fact that the proper processes and procedures were followed. It wasn't just like, come we stay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that on there.
I love what you've added, and I'm just going to add one more thing, then move on to the next question. I love what you've added, King Ori, Wayaki, because you've added three things which make a lot of sense to me. The first is the idea of choice. right? The fact that the women were fully empowered to decide to enter into a marriage if they wish to. And most of them would decide to enter into a marriage because most people seek that partnership, that union, and what comes with that union, right? And then the second thing that you kind of mentioned offhand a little bit is the idea of values, right? That this was a very value-driven society. This was not the idea of infidelity or etc. Come we stay, which ends up feeling disrespectful to the other wife. It was really values-driven. And in a values-driven society, the idea of, and I'm not saying we're not today, I'm just talking in general, right? The idea of polygamy did not have the same explosiveness that it may have today. So we have to remember the context, right, as we're talking about some of these things. And then the last one you mentioned is the idea of process, that there was a lot of respect, in the process to move from a bride all the way to marriage. And the fact that polygamy worked, right? And that it worked in our society, it was healthy. So while this, I think, is an interesting discussion for another day, and I know that it can be a very explosive issue, I think it's important to remember that the concept of polygamy then worked, right? And it didn't necessarily carry a lot of the heaviness or the challenges that it carries today. But I think this is a delicious discussion that we should go into more depth with in a later episode. So thank you for that, guys. But staying on this whole same concept of Ûthoni, this next question is a very interesting one, right? And just to set the stage for people, we have 9 questions in the area of Ûthoni. So this one's interesting. It was this, verbatim. If there was a separation between a man and his wife because of the mistreatment of the wife, so the man mistreated the wife, what happened to the children? Did the wife move back with them to her father's?
I guess I'll take that fairly quickly. So,
Ooh, these are some hot questions, right?
Yeah.
The listeners
Absolutely.
brought in. Okay, go ahead, Wayaki.
yeah, so, and we talked about this a little bit in the Ûthoni episodes, but, mistreating your wife was something that, or your husband was something that was forbidden, right? Or it's something that could cause your marriage or your Ûthoni or the Ûthoni between the families to collapse. Now, if the marriage was seen as irreconcilable, then they had to go through the process of called Kuraga Ûthoni, which means to end the relationship, the marriage relationship, and the family relationship. And there's a saying that says "Gotire shiratawa Ûthoni ogekua," which means there is no greater,
Battle.
I guess, battle or issue than divorce, because we really didn't believe in ending marriages. Marriages were for eternity, even after death. So, if that was the case, then the man's family would have to pay back. Let me take that back. So the man's family had Rashiad, and then if the wife went back to her family, her family, probably the man's family would demand some Rashio back, but because of mistreatment, it may not be paid back, right? So there are laws governing what happens, who is on the wrong in any of those scenarios. So I want to say the most difficult thing is the children part, because you pay Rashio so that as a man, your children, the children that come as a result of that union, belong to your lineage. And as a man, it's very possible to say that I don't want any Rashio. My family doesn't want any Rashio back because I want to keep the children. So it was very difficult. It was a very difficult situation to unresolve. And, most families would want to sit down and come up with a solution to keep the marriage going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if I can ask almost a follow-up from a physical perspective. So let's say they separate because of disagreement, and maybe the Rorashio is not returned because to the man's family because they want to keep the children aligned or adopted into their lineage, right? Their moherega. But what about physically the kids, right? So the woman moves back to her father's back then. Do the kids then stay in the man's household even without another wife? Or do the kids physically follow their mom and go back to their grandfather and grandparents' home on the mom's side?
I think each case was different, but for the most part, at least from what I've heard, is the children would never go with the mother. The children always remained with the father. But of course, there were nuanced cases. Maybe the children were too young for the father to be able to take care of. Maybe there were young children, babies.
Yeah.
But there was an understanding that because the ratio has been paid, the children belong to the man's family.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. That was actually very insightful, new perspective. I appreciate that. I don't know if King Ori has anything to add or if we should move on to the next question.
No, actually, I want to add that sometimes we have concepts that are modern, like that idea. I think the question is coming from a perspective of who will have custody, right, of the children as they are being raised. It's very difficult to separate a child and their mother while they are children. So I want to believe that children remain with their mother. But something is happening here. There are rights associated with this arrangement that belong to the children. Meaning, if it's a boy, okay, and now they're about to become a man, okay, are they going to still seek the blessing of their father? Let's put ourselves in those scenarios, right? Maybe they don't live here physically. Maybe they manage that, right? But is there a detachment, right? If they become old enough and they need to build their digira, where is this digira going to be built? Is it going to be built in his father's land or in his maternal grandfather's land, where their mother has sought to move them back to? These are the situations that created scenarios where we needed to be a bit more hygienic in the way we dealt with these matters. And so divorce was something that was very rare, okay? Even if a woman was to fall out of favor for whatever reason, they were never chased out of the land, right? Usually they would be they'll be told, okay, you go to that far corner, and they would be settled there, and they'll be told, yeah, you go ahead and raise your kids, but your kids have rights like all the other children, right? Maybe you and I are no longer in good terms, but you're still very much welcome. You're part of this family. So this idea that you can just go home, right? It wasn't a very common reality in Gikuyu society, because no one was chasing these women. Even if they fell out of favor with their husbands, they would still have rights. They would have their land. They would have all these things, because Nemora Ashiri, they've been rashiriod, and they've acquired those rights. So it is very rare to have a scenario where someone is so aggrieved that they actually went to their father's home and sought to take their children. That is divorce, right? That is now the proper divorce. And for that to be acceptable, the shira that will go into that arrangement to agree that this woman has now gone back to their father's house. Remember, she no longer we'd explained this, she no longer has even the kerere. She has no room. She has no bed there. There's nothing there for her at her father's house anymore, because they've gone through all these steps to make sure she belongs now with her husband. So there's nothing to go back to. So for there to be something to go back to, it is such a huge production and a huge undertaking to reverse all these things. So that scenario didn't happen that easily, the way we're imagining today. Like, we've had a big fight and you take the kids and you go to your dad's. That's not the way things used to work, you know? It's a nuanced question.
Yeah. And I love what you just said, King Ori, which is sometimes when we're evaluating what happened back then, we're using a current modern lens, which may not represent the same context. Because we have to remember this. The reason why marriages were more successful back then compared to today, right, is not because women were forced to stay in marriages, but because we had gone through these processes all this education, starting from before Irua into after Irua. We had a very values-driven society. We had very clear expectations, right, in terms of, the roles and responsibilities of each party. So we had an environment that was ripe for a successful union and marriage, right? And we were all ripe for that. So that meant that, we were, and remember, people were marrying in similar age groups. So it's not like you were going to find, from what I understand, an 80-year-old marrying a 12-year-old girl. That's not how it worked with the Agikoyo, right? So there was the environment was ripe for successful marriages. So when we think about marriage back then, we have to remember that we didn't have the same issues that we had today, right? And a lot of marriages, like you're saying, were indeed successful. And I'm going to say the last thing, Kengori, which I loved. Because today, when we think about divorce, or separation between spouses, what we usually comes with that is that the kids and the wife or husband lose their rights. And what we're saying here is that even in those moments when there's separation, a lot of times those rights were maintained, that children still had a place, they still had a father, they still had a home, right? And that is, I have to tell you, so beautiful to think that if for whatever reason the parents didn't work, the person was not homeless or without a family, they were still connected. And that is beautiful.
Absolutely. And don't forget what we've repeated here. We say motumia na wa mohirega. The wife belongs to the mohirega, belongs to the entire family. So just because one member, the husband, is having some strife with this woman, doesn't mean that everything else has now ceased to exist and all other relationships have been broken. No, not really, So it really, you can look at it as they've fallen out of favor with their husband, but they're still very much a member of the community and the society and that family that they came to be married into. And it's not easy to undo it. It's not.
It's not, yeah. Let me say one other thing. So you think, just in following what Kengori has said, if the husband and the wife have fallen out of favor, but their fathers are still in good terms, do you think they would sit down and dissolve that marriage? They wouldn't. They would do everything in their power as the Ûthoni to save it. So it was, and actually they had a responsibility because during the Ûthoni process, they took an oath to protect and save this marriage in case of issues. So, yes, there might be a slight falling out between the husband and the wife, but the wife belongs to the mohirega, and the Ûthoni ultimately would sit down and dissolve a marriage, which was something that no one wanted to do.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. In as much as we're answering very complex current questions, in the process of answering this, it reminds us of the beauty of our culture. It reminds us of the beauty of who we are. I want to say who we were, but it's still who we are. So that is such a beautiful thing. All right, guys, we're going to continue on this thread of Ûthoni, and we're now going to talk about single motherhood. So in terms of the third question. So this question verbatim came in this way. Could you talk about the rorashio when a girl is from a single mother household and her mom's rorashio was not paid, but the girl wants to get married? What would happen? Kengori, I'll pick on you on this one.
Yeah. No, it's a big question because and I can even say it's not. There are so many scenarios under that question, but let's start with let's first sidestep that this is a single mother, right? Let's just talk about what happens when a mother who is still married has not been, the ratio has not been paid. Because this question is a bit complicated the way it's been asked. If you're a single mother, then what are we talking about? The ratio has not been paid, right? Because there's an assumption here that ratio was meant to be paid. So let's just talk about a scenario where you have a lady who was married or is married, but her ratio has not been paid, and now her daughter wants to get married. Let's first give that very simple. That's a simpler scenario. In that simpler scenario, a mother's rorashio has to be paid first. Okay, you cannot have a proper. The father of the bride cannot accept the rorashio and still be in good books. Okay, if they have not first cleared the rorashio for the mother of the bride. Okay, it's very key that for any scenario like that to take place, you have to first clear. And sometimes, and it happens, even today it's still happening, where, the firstborn daughter is ready to get married. There's a suitor who's come up. They are ready. They've asked for a meeting. They've come for the first meeting. They've been asked why they're here. They say, we came to Russia. Usually, what a smart man should do in that scenario is say, you're very welcome, my son. Let me get back to you after I have had a conversation with the rest of the family. Okay? Which, if he's a wise man, would take the opportunity to first go clear arrears. Right? He rushed there, go, Maliza, he's part of the rorashio, and then now when the bride, when the daughter's suitors come back for the next meeting, and they're the ones who will tell them, hey, now you're welcome to come again, they will find a clean slate and they can give the rorashio, and he will be in a good place to receive it and not go through something we discussed in the last few episodes called kiagararu, which is when you go over, when the daughter goes over the mother, right? And the daughter has magogona for her being done that the mother never had done for her, right? So this is the way you do it. And then the other thing is this: if you have not rushed for the mother, okay, how do you know what to ask for the daughter? Because you're supposed to
You don't
ask for exactly what you gave for the mother of the daughter. So it is not a good thing to happen. But so I wanted to first clear that question. And then now the question here is, what if it's a single mother? What if this is a single mother?
Yeah, she was never
got
married, so she would
right?
never rush
Or was
your
married
daughter.
and got divorced, or whatever the case may be. It's a single mother. Right. So it's a single mother, never got married, has daughters now, right? And these daughters are ready to get married. What do we do about that scenario? There are still ways to go about it. If someone is in that scenario today, I want to, first of all, tell them, go back home. Go back to your parents, go back to your mother, go back to your grandfather, ask that question of them, because they will be able to guide you given the technicalities of what's going on. But on a very high level, what's supposed to happen here is that is one of two things. You have scenarios where a young lady or a woman who never got married wants to first be considered to be keamoshie, okay, to be given rights as if they were a male heir to that family, okay, and there is a gift that they give, okay, so that they can now be told, okay, perfect, you're now rightfully taken all these, you've taken a male heir's role, and you now can inherit your father's land. You can do all these things like any other male child. Now, when that happens, because you're not male, your brother will be the one playing the role for any male things that need to happen. So your brother becomes the father of your children for all spiritual matters. And so in that scenario, if that's happened, if you as a single mother, you've already had that happen, what you're saying is that you're not going to ever get married. Okay? And you're good with that. Mm-hmm. You want to settle and you want to be given rights to be able to own your father's land. And now you can settle on it and you have rights over it, and your children can inherit that land from you. So if you're that individual, and now your daughter is ready to get married, you can now bring your brother in that space to accept that rorashio on your behalf. And the way you deal with it after that, that's another topic. But there'll be a place for this rorashio to be brought to, right? And for someone to stand in the step of as a father figure for these children, and including this bride who's now being wed. So yes, and that scenario, yes, they can come and they can rush here. And how are they going to rush here? They're going to look at how does the female lineage of the mother, meaning how is the grandmother and any of their sisters, how are they married out? And that's the kind of ratio they would ask for. But it's a complex scenario, and it needs very careful understanding of what's being done first and what's being done next, so that we can know where are we, who is this person. Because some women may be single, but they might be getting ready to get married themselves too, right? Yes, you have a daughter who's getting married, but tomorrow you also want to get married. And if you're that kind of lady who wants to still get married, there's a different level of complexity to this scenario now, because there's a lack of institutions from a Gikuyu perspective that clearly fit your need, right? Because here you had a situation where now you needed to first be termed that you're capable of receiving these things, because now you've been given certain male heir authorities and responsibilities, right? But it's a complex question when it comes to single mothers. So the case needs to be understood. It's a case-by-case thing that really needs to be broken down. Wayaki, I don't know if you have, maybe you can add something to that.
I do have something to add. So we know for a fact that single motherhood was not encouraged as a way of life by our ancestors. It's still not encouraged today, because we want to build families with both parents, which is good for children and good for posterity. So that's one of the foundational concepts that we need to establish. So if a young girl got pregnant and was not married at the time, and then maybe didn't get married, when that happened, there was unlike today, there was an establishment of who is the father of this child. And the reason that was done is either the person responsible would then be encouraged to take this woman as his wife, so that the child can have fatherhood, right? And why is fatherhood important? Fatherhood is important because it gives you your lineage. You actually know which family you come from, which Moherega you come from, which Bare you come from. You can trace back your lineage, and you understand yourself in a physical and a metaphysical sense, right? Because now you know who your ancestors are. So if this was done and then the man did not want to marry this woman, then the man would be charged a fine, and then that would settle, he's the father, right? So after that, if she never did get married, let's actually do two scenarios. She decides to get married and she has a child. So the father, the potential future husband, would obviously marry her and adopt her child. So there was the adoption process. The adoption process involved, first of all, separating this child spiritually from their lineage, and then adopting them spiritually into the man's lineage. So that helped give this child a clear lineage picture. It helped give this child fatherhood, helped give this child a sense of belonging to a family, right? So that happened as well. So if then she decided not to get married, then, like King Ori said, her brother, because what you don't want is to have, say, your bare, or your family has a child from an unknown lineage, an unknown family. So what needed to happen for this child is to be adopted into the family. And it's a complex procedure. It's still done today. But, adoption is not just going to court and signing papers. You have to be able to give birth to this child spiritually into the family, so that they become a child. And that was a responsibility of the woman's brother, right? Because if for example, the father did it, then this child becomes the mother's sister or brother, right? So that's why the brother would do it, so that the child would be at the same level from a Rika perspective as the grandfather. So the brother, a woman's brother, is very important in that sense, because he would play the role of, if the father was not there, he would play the fatherhood role. He would be responsible for all the processes that this child would go through from a cultural perspective.
And
yeah, so it's complex, and we can talk more about it. But I know we want to move on to another question. But we wanted I wanted to give that a bit more clarity.
yes, I love that so much. And I also want to leave a cliffhanger and say that our next full episode, that is not a listener's edition, we're going to go into the topic of single motherhood or single parenthood in so much more depth, right? So thank you for this, Wayaki and Kingori. And I also want to say I've picked 3 things which are really big from what both of you have said. And this is my interpretation. And the first one is the whole concept of single parenthood never existed. Right? And it didn't exist because there was always either you'd been adopted into a particular mohirega, right? Or even if your parents were not together, you were still spiritually aligned to your father's home. Or if the father just didn't even exist, right, your brother stepped in as the father through, of course, certain complex processes that we're not going to cover today, right? So really, nobody was ever without a home and without a father and a mother through our processes. And guys, that is beautiful to realize that you are always walking through life with fatherhood and motherhood. And then the second thing that I loved is when we were thinking, or the second piece I picked from this, two of the 3, these are the next 2, which is when a single mother, quote unquote, was trying to make a decision as to whether to accept Rorashio from her child or not, for her daughter or not, there were 2 things that came into play. And the first is, did she ever envision that she would get married again? If she would get married again, it added more complexity and it would be addressed in one particular way. Or if she would never get married again and she adopted the role called Kehekia Sambodi, Dirari Dikana, right? Then the process was also very different, right? So again, there were so many nuances, but for me, the big and beautiful thing is that nobody walked through life without a father. And that, for me, is beautiful. All right, guys, before we continue, I want to read a quote. It's actually it's a direct quote. It's very related to what we just answered. And here's what somebody said. Also, I have seen where women go pay their own rorashio. And I'm going to ask you guys to comment on this. So they say, I have seen where women go and pay their own rorashio. This is a little modern way, I'd say. The situation was the woman who went to pay her rorashio was in the situation where the husband had died early and left her with 3 girls. The eldest wanted to get married, and the husband's family said that the woman was still young, so she could have remarried and the husband's family won't pay her rorashio. So I guess what I'm understanding from this, or where I want some comment from you guys, is this whole concept of a woman going to pay their own rorashio. Is this a modern approach to us, or is that just not even a recognized approach according to our customs and traditions?
Yeah, so I was going to say that, a woman cannot pay her own rorashio. She would have to, if her husband had died and she wanted her rorashio process to be complete, then at that point she can with her family complete that process, because she has taken over, especially if her children are young, she has taken over her husband's responsibility because she's not married anymore, right? And when a man died or even a woman died, there was processes for paying off whatever debts they had, right? Which were left to the family and the extended family. So in that situation, yes, she can pay her own rorashio. But so what this question or this comment is talking about is, if this woman was young and she wanted to get remarried, would where she was married before, did they have to complete the rorashio? I think that's kind of what they're asking. I could be wrong. Remember, once the Ûthoni process is done and the rorashio is done, this woman belongs to this family. It's very difficult, especially if the gurario has been done, for this stuff to be undone. And because remember, she has 3 children in this comment. These children belong to her late husband's moherega. So will the moherega give up these children so that this woman can be married again? Highly unlikely. Very high. I mean, today things happen, but it's very unlikely that the moherega and the family will want to let these children go.
Wayaki, am I hearing you right in terms of if you are married and rorashio and gurario was paid, your husband passes away and you've got children, technically, unless your husband's family pays back or returns the rorashio to your family, technically you cannot get married again, which requires the whole concept of rorashio being paid to your family from the new man.
Yeah.
Am I hearing you right?
That's correct, yeah. Once you're married in our culture, you're married for not just for life, even for eternity. So, it's not the modern marriage scenario where you can get married today and get divorced tomorrow.
Okay, so you can do come we stay, but you can't officially get married.
I don't want to endorse come we stay. But the honest truth is, if you've gone through the process and you've gotten married as a woman, and then, you bear children and, you've established a family, and your husband passes away, you're still married to this man, even in his death. Because it's a eternal marriage.
Wow, I have so many questions on this, but I would be derailing. Those would be my own questions.
You can
So
take
I'm
those
not
offline.
going to derail.
You can take those offline.
I
I don't know what King Ori wants to say about this. I know King Ori has some few things to say about this.
Yeah, I just don't think the scenario the way it's been painted. One, you already have this woman had children with now the deceased man. Honestly, she shouldn't be going anywhere. They should finish paying that rorashio, and she should just be settled there, and there should be no issue. But what I'm seeing here is that they're saying the eldest wanted to get married, right? That's what they're saying, and that the husband's family said that the woman was still young. Meaning that, and that's the reason they're giving for them not wanting to finish paying their ratio, because they're saying this our wife, okay, is still young. Let her go and get married again, so that they can escape this responsibility of finishing to pay her ratio. That is not a very smart. That's not a very smart family. I'm sorry to say, and that would no, really, because. This is one wife who's already been spoken for. You should be embracing her and supporting her now that her husband has passed on, and her husband is your brother, right? And now you should take her and her children, make sure you take care of them. And if you're a smart man, if you're a smart brother, you know very well that these 3 daughters, when they get married, you will be right there receiving rorashio. So you're avoiding to pay one woman's rorashio, and you're forgetting that there are 3 girls' rorashios that are coming your way down the pipe. These are not smart people, and even when you just look at it from just wealth and things in general, but also it's cruel. You don't care about your own brother's children, that they're going to no longer be associated with you if you say you're not paying rorashio and she's going to get married. You're actually divorcing this woman on behalf of your brother, and you're sending the children away on behalf of your brother as well. That is not, looking after your brother's affairs in his passing. So I don't like this family. I don't think they're the kind of people who we should be looking at to, to set any example for us as a community. Whatever is happening here is not very solid. Yeah.
Let me follow up to King Ori and just give him some kudos for being brutally honest, which is in Kikuyu we say koheana datogetau, just being straight with talking the truth. And as a mudhuri wa kiama, that's what you're supposed to stand with the truth. I think now that I understand that scenario, I'll say a lot of families will do this because they want to secretly take the late husband's. They don't want this woman to possess the late husband's property or inheritance, right? They want her to move away. So if maybe there's land, there's buildings, there's an inheritance, she lets go of that and goes to another family. Which is greed and wrong on many families. You cannot, once a woman is married into your family, she's married into your family for life and for eternity. So this woman, the Harurasha should be paid, should be completed. And that situation where you tell a woman, go and get married, you're still young, it should not be there because of the greed of wanting to dispossess her of the things that she built with her husband.
Yeah, that's very cruel.
Yeah. Ooh, when you guys put it that way, thank you for sharing that, right? Because when a woman gets married, she should feel safe, right? Knowing that she has been fully adopted, right, into the new family. And both of you are saying that is the right thing for the family to do because she is now your daughter. She is now your family member.
Absolutely.
Just because your son passed on doesn't mean that you then disinherit or distance his wife, right? Because she's part of you now. That's not our ways. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective, guys. All right, let's go on to the next question. Man, this whole Irua topic is hot, hot, hot. That's where majority of the questions came in, right? Hot. All right, so this one, I'm going to read the next question verbatim. Another one is, when a woman has a child out of wedlock and then she's subsequently married and then and rasheriod, but they separate or divorce later, what happens?
I think we've already touched on this one a bit. Yeah, and what's happening here is so we're saying a woman had a child out of wedlock and then she's married, right? Now, when a woman has had a child out of wedlock, actually maybe we did not cover this topic yet. If you've had a child before you're married and then you get married and you're being rasheriod, there are two things that should happen here. When you're being rasheriod, the child should also be rasheriod, especially if it's a girl. Okay? There's usually an extra mbuzi, an extra bori that's given to signify that you've taken the mother and the daughter. Beyond that, and that's just on Rokurashirio, beyond that, you should have done what we are going to be talking about in a future episode, which is you should have you should have performed a ceremony that separates this child from her birth father, okay, her biological father. Gekoyo does not put too much emphasis on the importance of a biological father. He's not indispensable. Yeah. So the biological father, so this man now who's marrying this lady should have taken the woman and the child, and this is now his new family. This daughter becomes his firstborn. Now they have a family already. Now if they then separate, or if they now divorce after having finished Rorashio and everything, and he's saying, I don't want this, then if it happens, and we said it's a very difficult thing to pull off, but if they do pull it off, then yeah, both the lady and this child that the lady had come with, they go back to their maternal parents, lineage. They're taken back
So long
and they
as the
belong there.
rorashio is returned.
So long as
That's correct.
you return the rorashio, and there are several magogonas that need to be done to clear those linkages, But yes, that can happen. In fact, not just this child who was there prior to the marriage, even if there were other children that were born, at that point there's no difference between the child prior and the children born after. After this marriage, all these children belong to this man who has married this woman, and if he decides he's divorcing this woman and sending her back, then all of them would be going back. There will be no difference. You cannot it's not easy to separate a mother and the children.
Yeah. What I love about what you're saying, King Ori, is that in our culture, there is no difference between a biological child and an adopted child.
Exactly.
They are the same. They are spiritually the same. And therefore, right, a man or a woman could not abandon his responsibilities of fatherhood simply because him and his wife did not work out. So the role of being a father, right, to your adopted or biological children was important, right? And fathers always had that role to play in their children's lives. And that's why I said before, which is what makes our culture so beautiful, right? Is that everybody had dual parents. You had a mother and you had a father. And I like what you said, King Ori, irrespective, I'm sure that is not a word, irrespective, right, of who your biological donor, for lack of a better term, was, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. All right, so are we ready to go to the next question? I think we are.
I think we are. I think King Ori addressed that question fully, and we had touched on some of its aspects before.
Yes. Okay, so it actually connects very nicely to this next question, which is one of our listeners asked, what happens in the case of child adoption? Was it practiced in the past? Is there a ritual or ceremony to enable it? And I know we've answered this, so maybe we could have a quick response in terms of this, because we've already answered this.
Yeah, let me say that adoption used to happen before, and it still does happen. But, let's not think about adoption from a Western perspective. Africans generally believe that, your lineage is very important. So when you if you marry a woman with a child, what you want to do is to be able to, because this child brings energy into this new union from another family, right? So if you adopt the child, you have to spiritually adopt them into your lineage. You have to give birth to them anew. We've talked about the process of the rebirth that Kikuyus do, or Woshiara Mwana na Abori. It's making sure that this child gets your spiritual lineage, right? So it's a metaphysical concept, but it helps this child be adopted and be agreed upon by your entire Moherega and your ancestors that came before that. Yes, we are adopting this child. This child belongs to us. So to answer that question simply is, adoption was done. The process was to be able to remove the child from their past lineage and then give birth to them spiritually into your family, into the father's lineage.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you. And I'm not going to collect additional feedback on this one, King Ori, because we've covered it. But I'm going to let you know that this next question is yours. Thank you, Wayaki, for that great answer.
You're welcome.
This next question, King Ori, has also been answered. So maybe you could give us a high-level response. And the question is this. Did widows remarry? Was there gurario? So here's the question I actually would like you to do, please. So it ends with, so really the question is, was gurario done for widows? But before you answer that, please quickly tell us what is gurario, and then tell us, was it done for widows? Which is different from rurashio.
Yeah. So gurario is the final step in the series of magogona for marriage. And this is the one where we were saying that you have finalized, giving all the main, you've done all the main ceremonies, and now this final one is the one you're grafting this lady to, forever be part of this family, and you're closing the door for potential divorce, right? And this is the one we call Koregakeade. It's a very big ceremony.
It's the one we said before your family accepts a gurario, you better be sure you're in this for life.
Yeah, you're
right?
in this. Yeah, you're in this. So after this point, honestly, it is very difficult. It's next to impossible and you should not be. If there are still doubts, you should not be taking the step to do a gurario, because gurario is that forever moment. Yes, the answer is yes. Gurarios were done for widows. If the man had not done it prior to his passing on, yes, it should be done, and it can be done by male heirs of his. Even a grandchild can step in the place of his grandfather and do gurario for their grandmother, because because this is the same name. If you've been named after that grandfather who had not finished doing gurario, you can do gurario for your grandmother. Even as a small boy. In fact, so they'll always look for the person with a name similar to this gentleman who passed away, and that person will be the one stepping in their place and finishing the gurario. So yeah, the simple answer is yes. Gurarios were done for widows. Did widows remarry? Only if they were not well secured in this family, right? Then they could, but it would first require that they still break the Ûthoni, which is a very difficult process. But if that was seen as necessary for whatever reason, if you have a widow who had no children, then it's cruel to keep her around. Maybe there might be that's a good opportunity for her to break clean from this marriage and go get married elsewhere. But sometimes, this is a very tricky issue we'll talk about another time also. Sometimes she would get children in that family, and that the man who had passed away, his lineage would continue, but obviously these children would not be biologically his. But it doesn't matter, because those will be his children now, and they would live. They would continue his lineage.
Thank you for sharing that, because here's where I was going to go, because I was listening to this from the perspective of our women listeners, right? Which is the idea of, it feels a little bit unfair that a woman could lose her husband or end up separated from him when she's very young. And that means that she can never continue. Based on our culture, it sounds like she wouldn't have a window to go and get more children or to get new companionship from a new husband or man. While a man would be able to go and continue his life and get a new wife, a new bride, and more children. So it feels a little unfair to a woman. But what I'm hearing you just said right now, King Ori, and we don't have to go into details right now, because I think that's a future episode, is that there were opportunities or moments for women to enter into new union. It's just the idea of where the children spiritually fell. Could you answer that question in some way for our women listeners? Give us some more clarity.
Yeah, so I want you to put now your shoes in. I want you to put you in the shoes of the bride's father. So I have a daughter. She's 20, and her husband has passed away, right? And they didn't have children.
No, they had one kid. Let's just say that they had one kid.
If they had a child, it becomes difficult to now say that that child should be also separated from their family, because that's what you would be advocating for, right? You're now saying, I want that child to be uprooted from the father's lineage. So this man who has passed away, who only had one child, you're very much okay with them not having a lineage. You're killing his lineage. So the one child, you're saying, no, I want my daughter back, and I want that child too, because you can't leave the child. Okay, that is advocating for killing that man's lineage. So it's in Gikuyu, we look at everyone. We look at both. We look at both scenarios. And in that scenario, if there are children, it's very difficult to advocate for a divorce because now a child is being affected.
So real talk. So now the woman for the next 70 years has to live life single?
You see,
No,
this
she
is what we were
doesn't.
saying. It's not single, right?
It's not being single.
Yes, she
Let's
does
call
not.
single the way we define it, without a man or a husband
So
for
the
70
term-
more years of her life?
So let's, if you want to look at it from that, yes, there would not be the one man for her that she wishes for to be, that she wants to be coupled with forever. That is very likely to be the scenario. And not just likely, but that was typically the scenario. If she chooses to stay there, okay, then she's saying, yeah, she's going to probably live a single life. But, you see, people have different ways of looking at this thing. You also have to think about the children. You have to think about other relationships that have been established. You have to think of, that's why we're saying it's to a Mogekoyo, it's not a one-to-one relationship of just romance. And if you're lacking that you need to feel like everything has broken, right? Like you've lost out on so many other things. No, in Mogekoyo, that was just one aspect, one part of the relationship of this marriage. It was multi-layered. So if one breaks, you're going to be held by the rest. They're going to uplift you. They're going to, and by the way, the even among wives from the same brothers, right? They used to call each other Airu, which is the same term for wives from the same man.
A co-wife.
Okay,
Yeah.
Co-wives, right? So they understood that they're going to take care of her. It's going to be a network. She's going to be part of that village. They're going to. It's very sad, but the solution would not be now to disinherit the now man who's gone of having children by taking the child away to go and take to another man. It's a sad scenario, but I don't believe they saw it as a helpless scenario. It's tragic, but it happens, and they do their best to support that person, and that person still has a place, and that person still has a husband. This is what these brothers of her husband will continue to support her. They may not that romantic relationship may lack, but she still is very well supported.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
for saying that. And if I can just add one thing, right, in terms of how I can try and understand what's happening as a modern woman, how can I interpret all of that? And I think for me, the big interpretation I would take from this is, if you recall the last two episodes, we talked about the importance and the significance of Rorashio. And we also talked about how before a father, accepted Rorashio on his daughter, he asked her, are you sure? Are you sure this is the person you want to move forward with? Because there was a lot of seriousness, and she had to confirm that she was sure. So I think that the advice that I would give, women, myself and every other woman, is that to return to the place where before we step into these marriages and get into Rorashio paid, on us, is to remind ourselves, right? Just based on a cultural perspective, forget the modern perspective. I'm looking at from a cultural perspective, the importance of Rorashio, and that when that happens, there is a spiritual movement and exchange that happens. So when we remember that when we're entering into marriages, we have diligence and we are sure. Of course, you can't be 100% sure, but we are making the best decision for ourselves before we step into those marriages. That's just the only, I think, one of the biggest pieces of wisdom that I would collect from this tradition. Wayaki, we're going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that, one of the things that King Ori mentioned that may be controversial is the fact that the woman the widow would remain in the family, and she would continue to get children from the family, right? From maybe a man in the family. This is not foreign. This is not that just like Kikuyus who did that. Many African cultures did that because they didn't want to lose their children, right? So the widow was very important. She was held up as important because she carried the children of that man who has passed away. And in fact, even in Deuteronomy 25, it says that, if a brother dies and the woman would not leave, she would get children from the family in the book of Deuteronomy. So it's not just the Kikuyus who did that or who valued the fact that this woman has bore 3, 4, 5 children. Now, if she is cast out and divorced, the family loses the children. And, from a marriage perspective, we looked at marriage, or traditionally, or older cultures looked at marriage as duty. We never looked at it in terms of, I'm not going to have a romantic partner for the rest of my life. We looked at it more of a duty or building a family. When you build bigger families and stronger families, you have more power, more wealth. That's how they used to look at marriages. And so to a certain extent, it's kind of unfair. But how many unfair things happen in life? Earthquakes, floods, storms, wars. So many unfortunate things happen in life. We can't just be looking at it as it's unfortunate that this woman is not going to have a companion. These children are also not going to have a father who gave birth to them. So we kind of look at life from a duty perspective as opposed to a modern romantic perspective.
Interesting what you're bringing
I want to add that from a spiritual perspective, there's something else that's also missing if that scenario takes place where the woman leaves with the child. This man who has died, his ability to come back to earth, was coming from these children that he left. This one child that he left, if they had had a boy, he would have been named. Right? And that's how this man would have lived on. And it was seen as a literal thing. Right? It is how we will continue to live. We lived in our descendants, through our descendants. So now, separating, it's a cruel thing for this young man whose life was also cut short from that spiritual perspective to say, and now we've taken away the only ability you had for living on in the spiritual realm. That's also tragic. Like
you guys are saying, it's tragic all around, right? And what we do on this podcast is we talk about the way our culture is, right? Not the way we wish it to be. We just look at what is our culture, right? And that's what you guys are doing. You're helping us look at it. And the beauty of what we take from this discussion today, whether somebody agrees or disagrees with the logic, the reasoning behind it, that's on each person. But the beauty behind this is that the Mogikoyo always had a good reason, right, behind what they did. So in this example, when you think about why was it so difficult to break Rorashio, is that there was reason behind it. It wasn't just whim, right? We're just going to make these unilateral decisions with no perspective. There was always a good reason behind it. And before we judge our culture, when we don't like something or think we don't, it's important to go back and understand the why, right? As we try to continue to understand our culture. Thank you so much, guys. Now, because of time, here's what I'm going to suggest that we do. There's 2 more questions on Irua. We're going to answer those. On Ûthoni. And then there's 1 question on Irua that we're going to answer. So we will close the episode after answering those 3 questions. And then in the next episode, right, then we're going to answer all the other amazing questions that some of them were really interesting. They had to do with social issues, single motherhood, spirituality, esoteric knowledge and earth. herbs, right? So beautiful stuff. But for today, I think we close with these two last questions. So here's the next question. This one is fascinating. Wayaki, I'm turning it over to you. And the question is, did women marry women amongst the Agikoyo?
That's a good question. And, what I've seen in, especially on social media is, people using this knowledge that some women would marry women as something empowering. So did women marry women? Yes, they did. Was it sexual union? No, it wasn't. So it goes back to what we've been talking about, to where, say, there was a man who had died and left a widow, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll just give this example just to create the picture of why this was done. Mm-hmm. So maybe this man had one wife and they had a few children, and then the wife had reached an age where she could not bear children anymore. But then she and her family were wealthy enough for them to want to continue this man's name and to grow his lineage. So what they would do is she would bring a woman as like a second wife, so to speak. This woman would bear children, but these children would be named as if the man was alive. Does that make sense? So what it did, and it goes back to what King Ori just said, is, like, you want to continue your lineage, you want to continue your name, you want to continue the reason we give birth to our parents. You name your father, you name your mother. As a man or as a woman, it's because you want to reincarnate them spiritually. You want them to continue living. And that's how I'm called Wayaki, because Wayakis have been reincarnated, so to speak, from the original Wayaki, right? And Jerry has been reincarnated from the original Jerry. Just been born, and that spirit continues to live. And so that was the reason a woman would marry a woman. So at a elementary, that's the elementary explanation. There's many other nuances that could have happened, but the reason was to continue the man's lineage who had passed away and was no longer there, and the woman herself was not of childbearing. Her childbearing years had come to a close.
Okay. Anything to add to that, King Ori?
I think Wayaki nailed it. This is about surrogacy, right? This is what's happening. You're looking for a surrogate. And that is usually the main underpinning. It can take multiple forms. There are different reasons and different ways it will happen. But what's really being sought here is children. Mm-hmm. And so this was our innovation for surrogate mothers, right, to come into existence. But we did not just use the womb of a woman who's coming in as a surrogate. We would marry her. We would give her a place. We would give her land. We would give her, and she would be married and have everything any other married woman ought to have.
A sense of belonging.
She'd get a sense of belonging. She'd become somebody's wife. She'd have everything. There would be Ûthoni. There'd be family connections between two families. So we did not just use her womb. We would make her part of our family. Mm-hmm. And then, and even her, she would have the right to name her family when the second child is born, and so on and so forth, right? So this was a more healed, a more balanced approach to surrogacy is how I would look at it.
I love that. Now, could somebody, let's say a woman gets married and she finds out she's barren, but she's still child rearing years, but she's barren. Could she also get married to at that stage so that she can have children with her husband, or this was only in the case of, like, say, widowhood?
Yeah. There's some kerera showing that could have also taken place, right? But it has so much to do with this woman having such a position in society that she feels the need to have children called by her name, my children. Mm-hmm. And that, therefore, they go ahead and bring a surrogate mother. You see? This is not going to be every woman who would have pulled it off.
I see.
Otherwise, the husband would have just gone and gotten another wife.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But this is a woman who wants these children to be somehow tied to her and her name.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense,
Yes.
yeah.
So,
and it's also interesting because remember in the origin story, I talked about my ancestor, the one who Gashie was named after, the Gashie in Kiambu, right? So he's not my direct ancestor, but he was my direct ancestor's brother. And I remember saying that Dare Keruru, he himself was barren, but he had a lot of wives and a lot of grandchildren. And, in fact, Gashie sometimes can be thought of as a bare. Even if it's still bare kehara, it's kind of like a sub-bare in a sense, right?
It's a big bare itself.
Yeah,
It
it's a
is.
very big one, right? And the reason I'm imagining, because he was barren, his wives probably went ahead and also... I'm not sure how it worked, but somehow the wives managed to get children. So maybe that's a topic for another day. But I mean, it happened because he's barren,
No, it
lots of
happened.
wives, but also lots of children.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it happened. And it's not, there's not too much imagination that needs to be put into how it happened. It happened.
It's not a mystery.
Yeah, it's not a mystery.
Right.
It happened.
And it's culturally, there were cultural ways to work through that, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay, good.
Yeah, there are ways of sanctioning those things. Yes.
Good. All right. Second to last question, guys. Did intercultural unions take place? And what custom was followed? The Agikoyo culture or the other culture's culture?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you marry a woman, you don't go set any. You don't set this. You're not the one setting the pace. You don't set any conditions. You go and say, I like that woman and I want to marry her. What do I need to do? So always, Mogekoyo used to follow the girl's lineage on what it is that their family is going to ask for.
Right.
So whether you go and marry a Maasai, you're first going to finish all the Maasai rites for getting a bride. Once you finish that, you bring her here. There are other rites for you to do so that she can have a Gekoyo Mohirega. She's being born into a Mohirega here. Then she can also assume some other Kikuyu aspects, right? So you first have to always finish with what the culture of the bride is asking for. And then if there's a need, you can now come and do other Kikuyu things on top so that you can feel that she's been well received. I don't know if that answers that question.
Very well. Succinctly and very well. Thank you.
Let me say something else. So now, when a Kikuyu woman or girl gets married to another community, right? She then ceases culturally to be a Mogekoyo. She can be a Mogekoyo by language, but then she adopts her husband's culture, whatever culture it is. Like when she goes there, and even if, like Kingori said, there's the process of obtaining the woman, if there's dowry, there's bride price, whatever the Mogekoyo asks for. Once she moves on to her husband's community, then she follows what the culture is there. And you know what that's the modern interpretation of this is you will see a lot of Kikuyu women will be married to other communities, right? But then want to go and impose our culture there.
Especially
And that is-
naming.
especially naming, which is extremely wrong, if I may say that with conviction. You can't go and dictate what your husband, that you want to follow the Kikuyu way of naming, but you're not married to a Mogekoyo. if you go and get married to another community, another tribe, you have to follow their, you actually belong to that Moherega or clan or bare. You have to follow their rules. And if that means you can't name your parents, that's what you have to live with. If that community names times of day, like the Luo name their children time of day or maybe an event, that's you have to be able to live within the confines and the cultural norms of the community you're getting married to.
Fascinating. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing
And
that.
I know that
you don't expect that the
will...
order of naming is similar to the Kikuyu order of naming. You're doing whatever it is that is practiced in that culture. Thank you for that great addition as well, Wayaki. All right, guys, let's get to our final question before I let people know what we're going to talk about next, right, in the next episode. But now we're going to shift from Ûthoni into Irua. Right. So, and as we answer this, right, I'm going to give both of you a chance to answer it. But the first person to answer it, please quickly in one sentence, remind us what is the word Irua. What is Irua? So, and the question is this: how do we equip our young boys with the necessary knowledge and skills to be future leaders? You know, touching on the stages of life, you know, be able to slaughter a goat, lead, etc. In other words, where in the modern day can a Gikuyu man meet the requirements to sit in a kiama?
I'll let King Ori, because he's a Mudhuri wa kiama, to lead us on this one. Yeah, I'll give him that respect.
All right, Mudhuri
thank you.
wa
I
kiama.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know the last answer that Wayaki gave sent shockwaves. When people heard that they should not be naming their parents if they've been married to another culture, but I want to say it's the truth, and it's good to always speak the truth on this issue of Irua. Irua is what we call circumcision, right? But it is more than that. Irua is a 3-part preparation for a young man or for a boy who's becoming a young man. And it is the preparation that's physical, a preparation that is mental and spiritual. And so this was the biggest transition in the life of a young man and in the life of a young woman as well. But because we're being asked about the men, let me first focus on that. So what do we need to prepare today? Number one, I want to ask you, please listen to, I think it's episode 3 of this season, where we talked about Irua in general. There are a lot of gems there. So please listen to that one first. It will really answer a lot of your questions. So I want to talk about how the stage, what the stages are and how that went about. Let me assume you're going to listen to that first and just go straight to how do you get this person to be ready and to do this, being able to slaughter a goat and other different things and leadership and going into kiama. This is the job of the father of this young man. And remember we said oithe, fatherhood is not just biological father. So it could be the maternal uncle who should be taking this role, or even an older brother who knows more about these matters. This young man, once they've been prepared and they've gone through Irua and are now a young man, they really should be the first body to their kiama should be given at that point. And this one we can talk about very openly. It's called Boria Hako. Okay? Boria Hako. Kohaka is, to rudimentarily translate it, it's like bribing. No, is not bribing. It has too much baggage, that term. But what it is you're giving a bori to the elders, and you're saying, "Hey, my young man, this is my young man." You're introducing them. This is my young man, and I want him to have access to kiama. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so you bring him and you give Boria Hako as a membership of sorts, a pre-membership, so that these wazee now know this is so and so's son, and he's welcome to be coming to the Kiama. And he won't be attending Kiama functions, but he'll be there in the periphery and he'll start learning things. Now, he's not allowed to go sit in a meeting where they're having any kind of big discussion. But there's always young men around who are doing all manner of things. They're being taught how to slaughter goats. They're being taught to do all manner of things. A lot of knowledge will start kind of through osmosis trickling into this young man's life if they are just in the proximity of the elders, because you're being told something. You're being told, hey, do you guys know this? And there's always an elder who's left with them, the young men, to give them context and some additional knowledge as they continue to be attending these Kiama events. So there's no shortcut. It's to be present. It's to be there. It's to, when you hear your dad is going or your uncle is going, if you have an elder that you know who goes to Kiama, as a boy, you are allowed to go there. Even before you get circumcised, you're still allowed to go. And there is something for you to do there. And so you start learning these things through that proximity. And so there are opportunities for that. That is where you learn the most things. You learn all these things you're asking. How does the body... Back in the day, a young man who has not been circumcised was not allowed to slaughter a goat. Okay? Nowadays, we seem to allow those things. They'll even slaughter a chicken, they'll do whatever. But back in the day, that young man was not allowed to shed blood.
Spill blood.
Shed any blood. So what would happen, they would still be taught how to do these things, but they would be taught on animals that had died and had not died of anything bad, or like a disease. If they had died of something, then an elder would look at it and they'd say, okay, come, let me teach you how to slaughter using this one. And they would, obviously, they wouldn't eat it or anything, they would throw it away. But that's where they would learn. This is this section, you remove it this way, this is how you do this. They would learn so many things from that perspective.
So
but now even today, you learn that in the Kiama as you get closer.
I love it. And this just one surface question is, I am hoping and imagining that for a man to be an official member of a Kiama, that there is certain criteria and that they have to be a person of good standing. That not just anybody off of, who just anybody off of the streets can just come in and become a Moduri wa Kiama. That there is criteria to make sure that it is the right person of good standing who is representing our community as part of a Moduri wa Kiama.
That is exactly what it is. Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, let me say something in addition to what King Ori said. The question itself is a good question because our culture has that process of preparing young boys to grow through Irua and through when they become a Moanake, Moduri, Kamatimo, like all the levels of life that you go through as a man. But, it's kind of half a question, and the fact that, even if you prepare young men or boys to become good, responsible citizens, you'll be doing half the job if you don't prepare the women. And so the women also need knowledge on life and the processes of life and as a woman. So they would also need that to be able to create a harmonious and orderly society. That process for girls needs to be thought about in terms of how do you prepare for marriage, how do you prepare for life as a young woman in the modern context, obviously, but how do you become a good partner to a young man and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I would, Jerry, I know we are out of time, but I would be remiss if I did not mention one other thing, that there were jamas. We talked about that in that episode as well. There was Jamaya Rika that was for the young men who would start practicing many different things around governance on themselves first as a club of men, right? Of young men. and they would have their own things that they do and their own processes, and they would have their own judicial processes. You learned a lot about the future from there on leadership. There were also Jamaya, Tumia, and all these other. There are many Jamas. There were 7. Please listen to episode 3. We talked about those there. Today, and I think we need to really talk about this. Today, the issue is how are we preparing our young men to becoming, fully responsible men in the community and full responsible women in the community? Are we just allowing the school system to do the entire job? Is it just Sunday school? After Sunday school, wakitoka, yes, they become, they've learned a lot about Christianity or whatever religion you observe. Yes, they've learned that. But how are they learning how to be, part of the community and how to be ready for the job market, how to be ready to be entrepreneurs, how to be ready to be leaders of certain qualities? This is where I would say there's a need, there's a gap that needs to be looked into. These Jamas need to be brought back in some fashion. I know there are so many clubs, Boy Scouts, this and that, Rotary Club, this. There are a lot of different communities that are different things that are trying to fill this gap for, developing the character of our people. But they're all good. But I think, and more emphasis, this is a call, this is just, I'm putting it out there in the ether, that we need this. We need to start thinking about it and come up with let's trust in God. He will resurrect these Jamas so that we can have our young people start being molded at an early age, so that they can. There are too many pitfalls from in the youth that you observe in your youthful days. So Gaya tuiguereda that we will have the opportunity to mold these young men and women.
Yes. Thank you so much, Waiyaki and Kingori, for all of the insights that you have provided to us today. And you have been so thorough and specific, and you've gone there. You've gone there in terms of answering the questions, directly, bravely, and honestly, right, with your full integrity, which I really do appreciate this, and I know our listeners have appreciated this. So thank you very much, Waiyaki, and thank you very much, Kingori. And now, to our listeners that submitted questions, we are so grateful for your submission, and I hope that you have heard your questions answered. But here's the thing. Today, we only answered 10 of the 23 questions that came in. So clearly, we're going to have the second episode, right, of the listeners' episode, because of all the questions you submitted, where we will answer the other 13. And here's what's so amazing. These other 13, they fall into some really interesting categories, from single motherhood to certain social issues, such as land and birthdays and artifacts, and how we named our children and named ourselves, esoteric knowledge, right, all the way to our spirituality as Ayekoyo. So let me tell you this, the next episode, listeners episode part 2, will be sizzling. So stay tuned and come back when we drop the second episode of Q&A. Have a great time, guys, and we shall talk to you later. Bye. Thank you for listening and for joining us on this journey where we honor our history, where we honor our heritage, where we honor our ancestors. We are grateful. You can find Matire Gemi on social media, which is Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can also find us on Clubhouse, where we will occasionally host some live discussions following some of our episodes. We look forward to seeing you. Our website is matire-gemi.simplecast.com. Our email is matire.gemi@gmail.com. And this podcast is hosted, produced, and contributed to by Waiyaki Gishanga, Kingori Kanyi, and Jerry Diho. Thank you, and please share this widely.